Yesterday, Yaraji explained that if one does not practice Satipatthana, not being mindful of the Nama-Rupa phenomena, mentality and materiality arising at the sixth sense door, then one is losing mindfulness and one is having negligence, failure, heedlessness, and one is failing to do the duty of the yogi. Negligence, failure, heedlessness is called pamada in Pali. When one is not mindful on the presently arising object, the mind will not stick onto the object, and there will be uddaja, restlessness, and there will not be samadhi, concentration will not develop. When the noting mind is not direct with the object, the mind will slip away and knowledge will not develop. Knowledge does not develop, and thus there will be not knowing. Not being mindful, defilements will arise. By lack of mindfulness, viriya, sati and samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration will not arise, and thus one will not gain knowledge. Samahito yatha bhutan janati, meaning that the person who has concentration, samadhi, can know correctly. Samadhi, concentration, is the proximate cause of jnana, knowledge. When one notes the presently arising object with effort, with sustained mindfulness, the mind falls calm and collected on the object, and it is samadhi, concentration. When the mind falls calm and collected on the object, samadhi, concentration develops, and one comes to know the true nature. When the noting mind falls on hardness, one comes to know hardness. When the noting mind falls on softness, one knows the nature of softness. And when the noting mind falls on stickiness, one knows the nature of stickiness. And when one's mind falls onto heat, warmth, cold, stiffness, tension, then the yogi comes to know the nature of heat, warmth, cold, stiffness, tension. Whatever the object is, whether it is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing, one should be mindful at the moment of arising. By being mindful of the object at the moment of arising, one comes to know the true nature. Coming to know the true nature, one dispels not knowing. Knowing wrongly will also be dispelled when one comes to know the true nature. When it is said that not knowing is dispelled, it means not knowing does not have chance to arise. So in this way, one replaces not knowing by knowing, knowledge. If one does not know the truth, when one comes across desirable objects, there will be kama chanda, sensual desire, which is priyuthana kilesa, obsessive defilement, lobha, greed, tasna, craving will arise. And when one comes across undesirable objects, there will be anger, hatred, aversion. So the anusya kilesa, latent, dormant defilement, surface, and then the defilements arise when they are given the opportunity. And when there is things to take pride of, and if one is not being mindful, there will be mana, conceit. There will be haughtiness. Not knowing cause and effect, one holds wrong view on jiva atta, individual soul, and parama atta, supreme soul. Having wrong view, it will be dittha nusaya. And if one does not note the object effectively, there will be uncertainty, doubt, confusion. It is vicikicca nusaya. Based on avidya, ignorance, moha priyuthana kilesa, the obsessive defilement, delusion arises. So these kilesa defilements torment the person, and thus the person becomes exhausted, being tormented by defilement. The defilement burns the person, and thus the person will be burnt. And Sayadaw gives an example. When fire breaks out, the fire leaves the fuel dirty, dark, and polluted. In the same way, when the defilements burn the mind is left dirty and polluted. And one develops unwholesome mind associating with lobha, greed, unwholesome mind associating with dosa, anger arises, unwholesome mind associating with moha, delusion arises, and there can be doubt, confusion, and one is wasting one's time with unwholesomeness. Wasting one's time with unwholesomeness, one does not have any control, so it becomes worse and worse and becoming extreme. When these defilements become extreme, one indulges in these defilements and one ends up committing transgressions by body, speech, and mind. So in this way, one performs misconduct by body, speech, and mind, and his or her life will be a loss. Practicing Satipatthana meditation can solve all these problems. By practicing Satipatthana, defilements will get weaker and weaker, less and less. When the defilements get weaker and weaker, less and less, then one will become free from the gravity of kilesa defilement. When one becomes free from the gravity of kilesa defilement, one's mind will be pure and wholesome, and one will be uplifted. When one is removing unwholesomeness, one will be developing wholesomeness, the mind will be uplifted, and the person becomes free from the gravity of defilement, and thus his or her life will also be uplifted. When one has not uprooted kilesa defilements, and when one does not practice Satipatthana, one does not know the truth. Not being mindful, one does not know the truth of suffering. One does not know the truth of origin of suffering. One does not know the truth of cessation. And one does not know the truth of path leading to cessation. Not knowing suffering as suffering, one knows wrongly. Buddha had regarded suffering as suffering, but not knowing the truth, the person does not know suffering as suffering, but she takes suffering as good and pleasant. Not being mindful, the person thinks that seeing good things, hearing good things are pleasant and good. Not being mindful at the moment of seeing and hearing, one does not see them as suffering, but instead one sees them as good and pleasant. And also, one does not know mind and matter, cause and effect, impermanent suffering and non-self. It is ordinary not knowing. Not only that one does not know, but one knows wrongly as well. One thinks that there is the living soul, and one takes things as pleasant and permanent. Not knowing the cause of suffering, one does not know that craving is the cause of suffering. Instead, one thinks that craving can lead to happiness. In this way, one is knowing wrongly. And also, one does not know that cessation can give happiness. But instead, one takes wrongly that not being reborn, not having further existence, it will be a great death. Seeing good things, hearing good sounds, smelling good fragrance, having to eat tasty food is good and pleasant, and thus cessation will be a great death, it will be a great loss of happiness. In this way, one does not know that cessation is the true happiness. Instead, they are afraid to gain cessation. And they think that cessation is a great death, and they do not want to gain cessation. They do not want to gain the state where it is deathless. So in this way, they know wrongly. They take off the happiness as suffering. And not knowing the truth, one thinks that the Pubbabhaga Magga, preliminary path, and Ariya Magga, the 8 noble path, is the path leading to a great loss, leading to a great death. So they think that the path is leading to suffering. So in this way, they do not know the truth and they are knowing wrongly. So it is moha, delusion. Most beings crave on sensual objects and they cannot give up the sensual objects. And they're taking suffering as happiness and they are taking happiness as suffering. In this way, they are knowing wrongly, they are knowing just the opposite of the truth. Knowing wrongly, knowing opposite of the truth, it is avijja, ignorance. As the avijja has not been uprooted, one is developing more and more unwholesomeness. There will be various kinds of unwholesomeness based on avijja, ignorance. So in this way, when one has not uprooted the avijja, ignorance, one will be developing more and more unwholesomeness, one after another, one after another. Not practicing Satipatthana meditation, one cannot uproot avijja nusaya, one cannot uproot ignorance, and thus one will be developing unwholesomeness continuously, one after another, one after another. The anusaya kilesa lying latent and dormant in oneself, one may not believe it, but it is true. If one does not practice Satipatthana, if one indulges in the defilements, letting one's mind go freely without any control, then if one comes across desirable objects, lobha, greed arises. Seeing beautiful things and taking a look at it as a whole, there will be greed. It is nimitta kaha. One sees the pleasant object and one has greed. Especially when seeing the opposite sex, first one sees as a man or a woman, and if the person goes into detail, taking a detailed look, taking a look of his or her features, the body, then the kilesa defilement, greed, becomes stronger and stronger. And it does not stop here, but it has been imprinted in one's mind. So when one has a spare time, free time, maybe at night, then the person will visualize what she had seen of the beautiful sight that the person had seen during the daytime. So this is compared to cows ruminating or masticating. When cows eat grass in the daytime and at night they ruminate it, they chew back what they had eaten during the day. In the same way, when one has seen pleasant sights, beautiful sights, one will recall the beautiful sight, and then one will develop more greed, just like the cows ruminating. Having avidya, ignorance, one also develops kama raga nusaya, sensual desire, based on avidya. So when one sees as man or a woman, and again when the person recalls, the person will also visualize as men and women. Also, when one comes across things to take pride in, there will be conceit, and whenever one reflects, more and more conceit will arise. So, seeing a person, the image will be stored in one's mind, and one will recall, and one will be developing more and more defilements, just like a cow ruminating. This is also explained by the example of taking picture. When one takes picture, the image has been imprinted on the film. But if light goes into the film, the image will not be imprinted on the film, and thus photo cannot be developed. One cannot print into a photo. But if one takes picture without passing the light into the camera or the film, the image will be imprinted on the film. And when the image is imprinted on the film, one can develop the film and then print into pictures, print into photos. And one can even enlarge it. One can print into the desired size of the photo. And one can even enlarge it. One can print it into any size one wants. In the same way, when one sees beautiful objects, the image will be stored and one recalls the picture of what the person has seen, and the person will be developing more defilements on what she has seen. In the example, when light passes through the film, images will not be imprinted on the film, and thus the person cannot print any photos from the film that has been spoiled by light. In the same way, in order not to have kilesa images, one should try to pass the knowledge light. When there is knowledge, the defilement will not arise, and whenever one recalls of that moment, the defilement cannot arise. So one should have the knowledge light, so that kilesa image will not be printed. When one sees things correctly as mind and matter, cause and effect, whenever one reflects on it again, one will only know them as mind and matter, cause and effect. And when one has discerned the impermanence, when one reflects on it again, one will only see it as impermanent. So, discerning correctly, clearly, and whenever one reflects back, one will see it correctly and clearly. So with this example, one can believe that there is anusaya kilesa, latent, dormant defilement, lying within oneself. And by practicing Satipatthana meditation, when one develops knowledge, one will understand this from his or her experience of practice. So there are unique characteristics and common characteristics of nama and rupa, mentality and materiality. One cannot discern these unique characteristics and individual characteristics as moha, delusion, is covering up the true nature. Moha, delusion, is covering up the true nature so that one cannot discern these unique characteristics and common characteristics. So one should destroy moha, delusion, in order to see the true nature, in order to see the truth. To destroy moha, delusion, one should develop knowledge, which is called vidya. One should develop vidya, and vidya will destroy the moha, delusion that has been covering up, hiding the true nature. When there is light, darkness will be dispelled. When one develops vidya, which is compared to light, one will dispel moha, delusion, which is darkness. When one dispels moha, darkness, by vidya, light, one will see things clearly and correctly, and one will understand what it is, why is it, and how is it. If one has not removed anusaya kilesa, latent dormant defilements, these latent dormant defilements that have not been uprooted will lead to prayutthana stage, obsessive stage, and it can further lead to vitekama stage, transgressive stage. If the kilesa genes have not been uprooted, there will be more generations of defilements and unwholesomeness. In order to remove, in order to uproot these latent dormant defilements, one should develop vidya, knowledge. Knowledge should be experiential knowledge gained through practice. Knowledge gained from theory, knowledge gained from teacher, knowledge gained from hearsay cannot destroy the avidya, ignorance. So it should be knowledge gained through practice. It should be bhavana maya. One should develop knowledge through the practice of mental development. Knowledge associating, knowledge that arises by practice can remove and uproot the defilement, latent dormant defilement. When knowledge arises, anusaya kilesa, latent dormant defilement, cannot arise. Whatever the object arises, when one develops knowledge, whether the object is pleasant or unpleasant, one will not develop defilements. One will not have these defilements. So one discerns mind and matter, cause and effect, impermanent, suffering, and non-self. Understanding, discerning mind and matter, cause and effect, and the characteristics of impermanent, suffering, and non-self, one will no longer have wrong view. One will no longer have wrong view of jiva atta, being or soul. Discerning mind and matter correctly, and whenever one reflects, one will reflect the truth as mind and matter, cause and effect. Knowing correctly, discerning mind and matter, cause and effect, impermanent, suffering, and non-self, one is removing anusaya kilesa, latent, dormant defilements. When one can remove anusaya kilesa, latent, dormant defilements, defilements of other forms cannot arise. One should remove avijja anusaya, ignorance, by developing knowledge. So when avijja, ignorance, has been uprooted, the other defilements cannot arise. Yesterday, Jaraji mentioned that avijja, ignorance, is the main one among anusaya defilements. So samsara, round of existence of nama rupa phenomena, avijja, ignorance, is like the head. If a person's head has been cut off, nothing should be done more in order to kill the person. As the head is chopped off, the person dies. In the same way, avijja is just like the head of samsara. By cutting avijja head, the other defilements are also removed automatically, as avijja, ignorance, has been removed. In order to cut the avijja head, one should develop knowledge. By developing knowledge, vijja, the other defilements, will also be automatically removed. In order to gain vijja, knowledge, one should have other factors that are the cause for the developing of vijja. One should have the knowledge that one can gain true happiness by removing avijja, and one should have the knowledge that developing vijja is good. So in this way, one should have the knowledge, and one should have faith and confidence that removing avijja, one can gain true happiness. Understanding the benefits, there will be a strong will, strong chanda, in order to remove avijja, and one should also have strong chanda in order to develop vijja. Having this knowledge and having this strong chanda are the prerequisites to gain vijja knowledge. One should have faith and confidence that removing avijja, ignorance, one can gain happiness. And one should have faith and confidence that one should develop vijja, knowledge, in order to cut ignorance. And one should have strong chanda to remove avijja. And when one is practicing Satipatthana meditation, in order to remove avijja, one should practice diligently. One should exert effort in the practice to note the presently arising object. Noting the arising object with effort, the mind will stick onto the object. Mindfulness will develop. When mindfulness develops, the mind will fall calm and collected, and thus one also develops samadhi, concentration. So one should be developing these factors, viriya, sati and samadhi, effort, mindfulness, concentration, continuously. When one develops viriya, sati, samadhi continuously, one also develops knowledge, discerning mind and matter. Avijja will be removed. Avijja, not knowing mind and matter, will be removed as one develops knowledge into mind and matter. When one develops knowledge, discerning mind and matter, avijja, knowing wrongly as person, being, will automatically be dispelled. And as the person continues to practice, developing viriya, sati and samadhi, when one samadhi concentration becomes strong, one also discerns cause and effect. Developing knowledge on cause and effect, one removes avijja, ignorance, which does not know cause and effect. And knowing the characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self, one removes avijja, ignorance. Discerning mind and matter, one removes wrong view on atta. In this way, one also removes ditthānusaya, wrong view. And whenever one reflects back, one sees it as mind and matter, cause and effect. When one discerns cause and effect, one also removes vicikicca, skeptical doubt, and one will no longer hold the wrong view that the Mahabrahma is creating. When one comes across desirable objects, there will not be greed. Kamaraga nusaya, sensual desire, will not arise, and it will not lead to priyuttana kilesa or videkama kilesa. And when one comes across undesirable objects, one will not have patika nusaya, aversion, and it will not lead to obsessive or transgressive defilements. When one sees that things are impermanent, one will not have mana, conceit. Seeing things correctly, seeing things clearly, there will not be confusion or doubt. So in this way, when avijja, ignorance head, had been removed, the other defilements will also be automatically removed. In order to cut the avijja head, in order to cut the ignorance head, one should practice Satipatthana meditation. In order to do so, one should have faith and confidence on the benefits of Satipatthana practice, and one should have strong chanda to gain the benefits of Satipatthana practice. And when one has the chance to practice, one should practice diligently, noting the presently arising object with aim and effort. Noting the presently arising object with aim and effort, one's noting mind will stick onto the object, sati, mindfulness, will develop, and samadhi, concentration, will develop. And when samadhi, concentration, becomes strong, one discerns mind and matter, cause and effect. One comes to know the true nature, and thus knowledge light will arise. When knowledge light arises, ignorance darkness will be destroyed. And Saraji will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.